Yo, what's up? It's the HOvid 1984 show. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Mario Perea. We're going to stay on topic today, talking about the vaccine loophole. Okay? Vaccine loophole is when the politicians use government to fund a vaccine, and then they use their partners in the private industry to mandate that vaccine, setting up the potential for almost 100% demand for the vaccine in the population. So, they do all this to get social clout, to get rich, and they use the vaccine loophole to avoid having to take accountability for any damage or negative effects that the vaccine might have in society. And they hide behind these shell companies, private companies, but they're hiding behind them. So the vaccine loophole. The foundation of the vaccine loophole is to understand how heavily invested the government was in the COVID-19 vaccine. Like, you have to understand how invested they were and how weird that is, right? That's the weirdness of this situation. It's like we live in a reality where the government funds the research and development of the drug, and then this drug later goes on to be mandated by, take it or you're fired. How weird is that the government makes a drug and then you have to take it or else you're fired? Are people really lacking like that, thinking that the government is this benevolent institution? So benevolent? How benevolent can they be, though, when the drug that they're creating, and they knew that sometime it would be used against people? You take it or you're fired. The politicians who funded the development of this drug, they knew at some point this drug was going to be used, saying either take it or you're fired. And they don't care because they got the vaccine loophole in effect. The politicians, they get to keep their hands pretty much clean. Okay? Until the HOvid 1984 show steps on the scene. And we talk about it because we have to understand how heavily the government is invested in this drug. And the politicians themselves personally are invested in this drug. They got their stocks. They get social clout if they save lives. So we have to understand how heavy they were invested. And really, what we're talking about is how without the government's involvement, the vaccine wouldn't even be available. Really. It's not that they were just an investor in the vaccine, although they were the largest financial investor. But it was other things that the government brought to the table that made them the most important and valuable investor. And so let's talk about it. Let's talk about how weird it is that we're living in a world right now where the government's making drugs that we have to take or else we get fired. Boom. We go to the Forbes.com, August 5th, 2021. COVID-19 vaccine, a monumental scientific and collaborative feat. These vaccines save lives. So what she's talking about here, Rumi Khan, who's the author of this article, the collaborative feat was the government getting all the seed money together, handing that seed money over to the pharmaceutical companies, saying, hey, make this drug for us. That's what the government was saying. We're going to use your guys' operation here, and you're going to make this drug for us because the government's going to go on to distribute it. So the article talks about why vaccines are good for you, all this mRNA technology, how brand new it is, but why it's okay to take. Just going to get right to the issue here, okay, about the development and the government's involvement in this development. Okay? Boom, right here. The record development cycle of COVID-19 vaccines due to the culmination of many factors, including unprecedented scientific collaboration, a large body of preceding research, unparalleled government funding, and administrative logistics and regulatory processes prioritized with accelerated parallel timelines. There you go. Unparalleled government funding. What they're saying here is that amongst all the people who did invest in the vaccine, the government's funding was unparalleled. Okay? The government also, and this is the kick right here. The government was able to get regulatory processes prioritized with accelerated parallel timelines. No investor can accelerate your timelines like the government can. And the government did. And it's because they did that there is now a product on the market that is being used as a way to discriminate against us in our workplace. Used as a way to discriminate against us. Can we go into some bars, go into some gyms? That is a government drug that is being used to discriminate. And the only reason why that drug exists today is because of unparalleled government funding and regulatory processes prioritized with accelerated parallel timelines. Boom. Forbes.com is letting us know this. Collaborative effort. We go into number 3 in their reasons here. Vaccines development requires lots of testing for efficacy and safety, making the process very lengthy and costly. Early into the pandemic, the U.S. government and corporations poured massive funding into the research and development of COVID-19 vaccines. This substantial funding circumvented the financial hurdle, eliminating the need to raise funds, and enabled the pharmaceutical companies to conduct the necessary vaccine research and clinical trials effectually. It says that the substantial funding circumvented the financial hurdle, eliminating the need to raise funds. Okay, the government was unparalleled funding, right? So they didn't have to, the pharmaceutical companies didn't go to the market and say, hey, we have this great product, everybody, do you want to invest in it? And then a bunch of people said, yeah, we'll take the risks and invest in it. And then that's not what happened. The government took money to the pharmaceutical companies and said, make this drug for us. So don't get it twisted thinking that this drug is something that the pharmaceutical companies brought to the table. No, the government came to the pharmaceutical company and said, make us this drug. The government owns this drug, okay? And that's what I'm talking about. The government is responsible for its creation. So all these politicians right now talking about, oh, there's a free market, we can't get the government involved in between employers and employees. We're not asking you to get involved in between employees and employers. We're asking you to take some accountability for the drug that you guys created and that's now being used against us like a weapon. That's what we're talking about. So miss me with all this that the government's a third party to the vaccine. They are the ones who paid to have it made. But that wasn't all that they did, and that wasn't it. Number 4 goes on to say here, normally the clinical trial phases of vaccine development and testing occur sequentially, making the timelines very long. During the pandemic, many of these timelines were accelerated and done in parallel to shorten development. Regulatory agencies worldwide prioritized COVID studies, committee hearings, and data reviews, instituted rolling reviews, which allowed pharmaceutical companies to submit data on an ongoing basis throughout the trials rather than waiting until the end of the trials. Come on. A trial is done so that you can test something and then see happened, to see the effects. If you haven't had a trial, if you're doing these rolling reviews, I digress. Because what I'm saying here is that only the government can make that so, that you don't need to have a full trial done in order to consider your review valid. Only the government can take away that regulation. Private investors, I suppose, could have came in and bought off some politicians, but that didn't need to happen because the politicians paid for this drug that is now being used against us. Go back to the article. As the clinical trials proceeded, companies simultaneously tooled and scaled up the vaccine manufacturing facilities. The financial risks associated with pre-building manufacturing were mitigated by vaccine pre-orders and guaranteed buys from governments worldwide. Because not only was the government giving these companies the seed money, saying, here's the money for your research, go develop this drug at the direction of the government, but the government was also kicking them money on pre-orders. So we're going to buy it from you. So here's even more money. So these pharmaceutical reps are getting paid. They're getting chipped out. Anybody who's invested in these companies is getting chipped out. Are you kidding me? The government steps in and says, hey, that's what happened here. The government stepped in and said, hey, you're going to be our partner in this. Government didn't ask the pharmaceutical companies if they wanted to be the partner. Nah, this relationship is already solidified. And it's a nasty relationship. It really is. Because the government funds the research and development. They cut through all of the red tape, including any testing and necessary trials, things that we've deemed necessary in the past that you couldn't get through without having to take years of filling out paperwork and paying for different tests. No, the government comes through and cuts through that, and nobody else could do that. This drug is a product of the government taking our money. If the government wasn't involved, this product would not be on the market. And so that's why the government is such a concerned party in this matter. So Scott Bedke, miss me with all of this. I'm an old school Republican. I don't want the government to get involved in private business. Well, what about the government getting involved in vaccine manufacturing? Are you okay with that, Scott? And now that the government has created this drug, you're going to tell me that the government's not responsible for how it's distributed after the National Guard was shooting this into people's arms? Literally? You guys had the National Guard out here, and now you're going to say how it affects our community is not the government's problem. That's something the private sector is going to have to deal with. Nah, I see through the veil. I see through the vaccine loophole, and I'm bringing it to you, and you will be held accountable. HOvid 1984 show. Thank you for checking in. Stay tuned. Peace.